appears that we're on a glide path up in Washington where the SNAP benefits will be fully honored, hopefully by the end of this week.
I'm concerned that we're not going to have on day one controllers come back into the towers right away.
If you open your EBT card app and see that in November, your food stamp money only arrived partially or did not arrive at all, the two questions that matter most to you are very concrete. Will I receive my full SNAP benefits for November? And what do I need to do now that the federal government has reopened? A series of memoranda from the Food and Nutrition Service under the U.S. Department of Agriculture, together with announcements from the states, finally converged on the same conclusion. SNAP benefits for November 2025 must be paid in full, and any amounts that were reduced or delayed will be added to your EBT card through supplemental issuances. The story began in October, when FNS sent a letter on October 10 and a follow-up memorandum on October 24 to the states, explaining that without new appropriations, the agency could not fund November SNAP benefits, and instructing states not to send issuance files for November to the EBT processors. In early November, the November 4 guidance allowed the use of contingency funds to issue partial benefits in amounts roughly between 50 and 65% of the maximum allotment. As a result, in the first days of the month, some households received noticeably less than in previous months, some received nothing at all, and there was still no clear commitment that the remaining amounts would be made up later. After that, a November 6 ruling by a federal judge in Rhode Island ordered the administration to find enough money to fully fund November benefits for roughly 42 million SNAP recipients. At the same time, Congress passed a temporary appropriations law for fiscal year 2026 that restored spending authority for the program. Based on this new funding framework, FNS issued a memorandum on November 13, 2025, stating that SNAP now had sufficient resources and directing states to take immediate steps to ensure that all households receive their full November benefits as soon as possible. In other words, the earlier partial benefit guidance was no longer in effect, and any missing or delayed benefits had to be issued as supplemental payments. For beneficiaries, the significance of the November 13 memorandum lies in 3 points. First, FNS set a clear goal of paying the full benefit for the month, rather than partial benefits. Second, the agency instructed states to work with their EBT processors and FNS regional offices to submit additional issuance files. That means the missing amounts will be loaded directly onto your current EBT card based on your existing case record. Third, FNS placed responsibility for the exact timelines on each individual state, so the final specific dates were always announced by state SNAP agencies, not through a single national hotline. State press releases show how these directives were turned into practical guidance for SNAP recipients. In North Carolina, the Department of Health and Human Services announced on November 13 that following the budget agreement and new guidance from USDA, the state would load full November SNAP benefits onto EBT cards for about 600,000 households. The release noted that on November 7, the state had issued about 65% of benefits based on earlier FNS guidance, and it explicitly assured residents that they would receive the remaining portion of their November benefits and that the partial amount already received would not be taken back. In Georgia, the Department of Human Services stated that people who had received partial benefits would get the remainder no later than November 18, while those who had received nothing so far would be paid according to the state's regular issuance schedule. New York used a question-and-answer format on its official website to explain that the shutdown might delay November benefits, but that SNAP recipients would still receive any missed benefits once funding was restored and federal guidance updated. Minnesota, in its shutdown information page, stated that after the federal government reopened, SNAP benefits had returned to the normal issuance schedule. Taken together, the states all conveyed the same message based on the November 13 FNS memorandum. November benefits would be paid in full through additional deposits onto the same EBT cards that people were already using. From this series of announcements, we can draw specific steps that SNAP recipients need to understand in order to receive their full benefits after the government reopens. First, you should understand that most supplemental deposits are automatic. FNS did not require states to make people file new applications just because November benefits were late or reduced. Instead, it instructed state agencies to calculate and submit supplemental issuances through their systems. When North Carolina, Georgia, New York, or Minnesota reassured residents, they spoke in terms of system dates when additional money would be loaded onto existing EBT cards, not in terms of reopening or reapplying for cases. If you are already approved for SNAP and there have been no major changes in your case, the default assumption is that the system will automatically process any missing amounts based on the information it already has. Next, recipients need to actively monitor the payment schedule announced by their state SNAP agency and check the transaction history on their EBT card. In its November 13 memorandum, FNS only set the general requirement of as soon as administratively feasible. Specific dates such as November 14 in North Carolina or November 18 in Georgia were set by each state. After the government reopened, checking the website or press releases of your state SNAP office is the best way to know when the partial November benefits will be paid and when the supplemental amounts will be added. At the same time, looking at the transaction history rather than only at the current balance helps you see that there may have been two separate deposits, one for a partial benefit and one for the supplemental remainder, and that the total for the month may now match the amount you used to receive in normal months. Finally, you need to contact your local SNAP office only if the state's announced deadline has passed and you still have not seen the deposit. The official releases do not go into individual cases, but they all encourage beneficiaries to follow information on the state's official channels. If the state has publicly stated that November benefits will be fully paid by a certain date, and you do not see any new transaction on your EBT card after that date, then calling the local benefits office or contacting the SNAP agency is the reasonable next step. You do not need to call before those dates because most of the catch-up process is handled automatically by the systems using data that the state submitted after the FNS guidance. All of these steps flow from the way FNS guided the states in its November 13 memorandum and from the way states turned that directive into concrete commitments to their residents. The federal agency does not speak directly to each SNAP recipient one by one, but it made it clear that households must receive their full November benefits, including amounts previously reduced to about 65%, and that the makeup payments must be delivered through additional deposits onto existing EBT cards. States such as North Carolina and Georgia used press releases to announce the date when the remainder would be loaded, while New York and Minnesota relied on shutdown information pages and question and answer sections to emphasize that missed benefits would be paid once systems returned to normal schedules. For families living on every dollar of food stamp benefits, this entire chain of changes can be summed up in a simple message once the government has reopened. SNAP benefits for November 2025 have been confirmed by FNS to be paid in full. Any money that was reduced or delayed will be added directly to the EBT card you already use. Your role as a recipient is to follow the announcements from your state SNAP agency, check the transaction history on your card, and contact the office only if the announced date passes and no deposit appears. When you understand these 3 points, you can be more confident that no matter how complicated the budget fight is at the federal level, your November benefits will be handled according to the commitments made in the official documents.